Hey, welcome back. Let's talk about crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is a kind of a new concept. It really has been, the word has been around since 2005, so it's about, well, not that old. And crowdsourcing means relying on the crowd, which is so possible now with the internet, relying on the crowd to help you get things done. It was not a word invented for journalism, although we use sources all the time. Crowdsourcing is used in a lot of ways. If, for example, I want to crowdsource a graphic, I might throw my need out to the crowd and say, hey, I need a logo or a graphic done for this kind of company or job. What can you come up with? And it's not just people sending in their individual ideas, it's all these people working for a common goal, so they might edit each other's graphic or logo until we get to a place where we have something we like. There are all kinds of examples of crowdsourcing. Computer code is written in a crowdsourced way sometimes. Wikipedia is an example of a kind of crowdsourcing where we have many people working on the same project. Let me tell you about an interesting crowdsourcing project that involved newspapers but wasn't necessarily journalism. The Hawaiian language nearly disappeared, and people in Hawaii wanted to preserve their native language. It's 8 consonants and 5 vowels. And they wanted to preserve this language, and what they had was 60,000 pages of newspapers in Hawaiian. And they wanted to translate these pages into English to help preserve their language. The problem is, how do you take 60,000 newspaper pages and put them in a place where people can translate them? To type them into the computers would cost about $2 million, which they didn't have. So what they decided to do in Hawaii was to crowdsource the project. So they asked for volunteers, and they got volunteers throughout the Hawaiian Islands, on the US mainland, and around the world, including people who can't even read the Hawaiian language, to take these pages and type them into the computer. They got the whole job done. The $2 million job was done by volunteers, and now they're using crowdsourcing to check their work before they can take it to the next step, which would be to come up with a wonderful translation of Hawaiian into English. So this is one way where a large crowd of people, each of them taking little bits of what they have, can make something big. Let me give you 2 more examples of crowdsourcing, examples you're probably familiar with. In many places around the world, we have an alert program for missing children. In a lot of countries, it's called an Amber Alert. What happens is, when a child is missing, an alert goes out through cell phones, through billboards, digital billboards, on the radio, and everybody is told to watch for a particular child or maybe a car that that child might be in. So now we have a big crowd of people working on a common goal, find that child. And we might have thousands or millions of people watching for whatever the Amber Alert has asked them to watch out for. This has saved and recovered a lot of children. Another kind of crowdsourcing that you might have done, also maybe while driving around, goes like this. In big cities, motorists are encouraged to call in and report accidents, construction delays, other problems on the roads, and then those are broadcast out through the radio station. And in this way, the whole commuting public in the morning can give little bits of information based on where they are that complete a bigger picture about where the traffic hazards are. So you can see that whether we're trying to translate Hawaiian language newspapers, find lost children, or figure out how to get to work in the morning, crowdsourcing has become a part of our daily lives. Now let's talk about how we can use crowdsourcing in your journalism. Now let's talk about how crowdsourcing is used in journalism. A young couple moved to Doha in Qatar and decided that they wanted to start a news publication. They were both journalists, and they had worked at traditional news media, but they wanted to start something new and online in Doha. They call it the Doha News. And their idea was to set up an online news service that would rely heavily on crowdsourcing to tell the news going on around Doha. So from the beginning, they made themselves visible, and they made the community aware that they were looking for photographs, texts, emails, videos, anything that would help tell the story of that city. and they get a lot of them. They've become very good at the Doha News about covering fires, in part because they have a very active community that is always feeding them information that they verify, very important, and assemble into a news report that the community can use. So this is how they've been doing their journalism in Doha. If you go through Shabina and Omar's website, you will find lots of requests to readers saying, anyone know more? What's happening where you are? And readers, the community, the participants respond to this. Shabina and Omar, in fact, have a membership idea about who it is that puts the Doha News together. Let me show you one other example here. This comes from an election in the United States. The New York Times simply asked people on a presidential election day, how are you feeling right now? And people could text in a word, and the word would appear on the New York Times' website, and then people could upvote each other's words, and it gave through the day a moving portrait of how people were feeling about the election. If you decide to use crowdsourcing in your reporting or in your news, and I highly recommend it, because what better way to engage the community than to make them participants in what you're doing. If you decide to use crowdsourcing, don't forget your role as the journalist at the center of all this. That means you need to check out what comes in. You don't just take a tweet and blast it out again. You have to verify what you get. And you have to keep in mind what we've talked about in terms of plagiarism. Everything that comes in should be credited. This is a way of acknowledging and rewarding your community for participating, and it's a way for being straight up with people about where the information is coming from. One other little piece to talk about that's related to crowdsourcing is called crowdfunding. Oh boy, you wondered when we were going to get to the money. Don't get too excited. Crowdfunding is, just as you might expect, the idea that if a whole bunch of people give a little bit of money each, maybe we can sustain some kind of journalistic enterprise. And you're probably familiar with crowdfunding exercises or programs or campaigns. We see them all the time. Crowdfunding, many sites for crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is used to pay for inventions, pay for creative works, pay for artists to do their work, paid to help people in need. Crowdfunding is used a lot. There's a little bit of news about how crowdfunding works with journalism, and that is that people typically do not want to fund a big journalistic enterprise. They don't want to pay, because they're giving little amounts of money and you need a lot of them. They don't want to pay for an ongoing television station or web operation. But what people like to do in a crowdfunded way is they like to pay for specific news projects that they want to see, hear, or read. And they especially like to give a little bit of money for those if they're assured that there is a way for this to be published. So if you have a story that's going to be published someplace or where a publisher is willing to take your story, this could be a time when crowdfunding would work for you. But don't plan on getting rich and retiring on crowdfunding. It typically doesn't happen. One Dutch newsroom raised $1.7 million through a crowdfunding campaign, and that's the exception. I want to leave you with some words that the Dutch publication said, and it sums up how we should feel about crowdsourcing. It's a paraphrase, but the message from the Dutch publisher who did that big crowdfunding campaign was, don't ask what the crowd can do for you, ask what you can do for the crowd. Thank you.